in any country. Every technology can be used in very different ways. We saw this in the 20th century when people took the same technologies of the Industrial Revolution, trains, radio, television, cars, electricity, and created fascist regimes, and created communist dictatorships, and created liberal democracies. It was the same technology. You can use radio and television to brainwash people with government propaganda, and you can use the same technology of radio and television to open people's minds to an immense diversity of views and opinions. The airwaves, they don't care what you do with them. So it's also with technologies like the internet, it can be used to connect people together and make it far easier for people from different parts of the world, not just to connect technically, but to connect also mentally, to understand the world of somebody in a different culture. And you can use the same technology of the internet, again, to brainwash people or to incite radicalism and hatred and hatred of other people and foreigners, because it's also much easier to spread disinformation and to spread fake news and conspiracy theories and all that. So the technology by itself, it's neither the problem nor the solution. Ultimately, it's still up to society to decide what to do with the technology. I don't think that the big entrepreneurs or the engineers are the source of the problem. They become a problem if they have too much power and they don't have any checks and balances and they don't cooperate with other forces. As I said before, mostly what they lack several things. They lack a deep understanding of society, of history, of philosophy. So it's difficult for them to know what are the real consequences of what they are doing. You connect 2 billion people to a social network. To understand the consequences, you need to know something beyond computers and mathematics. You need to understand human society and human history. And also, they don't really represent anybody because nobody voted for them. Trump was elected. Merkel was elected, but Zuckerberg wasn't elected by the 2 billion users of Facebook. So he doesn't represent anybody. So he has an important role to play, but it should not be a dominant role. If we entrust the future of humanity to a small group of engineers who don't represent anybody and who have a very sometimes naive understanding of history and philosophy, then this is a recipe for disaster. A lot of people talk about only artificial intelligence, and they think this is the big invention of our era. But by itself, artificial intelligence is very limited unless it is combined with biotechnology and bioengineering. Because the key thing is not just to have very powerful computers. The key thing is what these computers can understand about humans. And this is true even something like a self-driving car. You cannot put a self-driving car on the road unless the car can understand humans. Because it needs to, to understand human emotions. If somebody is running, if a kid is running after a ball and is going to jump on the street and things like that. So a self-driving car needs to understand human emotions. For that, it needs biotechnology. You need to decipher human beings. It's not just about computers. And what we see now in the world is really artificial intelligence and biotechnology becoming more and more combined into a single technological revolution, which will soon enable companies and governments to hack human beings, to decipher human beings. Again, the key is to gather data with biotechnology about the human body and especially the human brain, and then analyze this information to decipher the human being, to understand your emotions, your feelings, your opinions better than you understand them. And the first thing it enables is to predict what humans will do, But then it also enables manipulation and control. We are now seeing the creation of two kinds of surveillance regimes. In the West, we see the creation of what is known as surveillance capitalism. Corporations which amass enormous amounts of data about each individual person, at present basically to sell us things, but down the road it could be used for other purposes. In other places around the world, you see this kind of thing being done by governments, not corporations. AI has enormous positive potential. Otherwise, it would not be tempting. Like we just spoke about self-driving vehicles. Every year, 1.25 million people die from car accidents. Most of these accidents are because of human error. Now, this is twice actually, the number of people killed by human violence. War, crime, and terrorism kill just half that number. If we switch from human drivers to self-driving vehicles, we could save probably 1 million people every year. And that's wonderful. Similarly, artificial intelligence and biotechnology combined could give us better healthcare and cheaper healthcare than ever before in history. And that's wonderful. But then you also have the dangers of losing all human agency and freedom, creating these extreme totalitarian regimes, many people losing their jobs, and economic collapse in countries which rely on cheap manual labor. There are dangers. I emphasize the dangers in my writing and in my talks, mainly because about the positive developments you hear a lot from the entrepreneurs and the engineers and the scientists who are developing the technology. It's obvious. They emphasize the good side. So it becomes the job of historians and social critics to emphasize the dangers. But I try to keep both of these in mind. Otherwise, you don't understand why people are doing it. If there are only dangers, why do it? The first thing is we should be honest with ourselves and with our kids and tell them and tell ourselves, we don't know how the world would look like in 2050. That's the first time in history that we don't know even the most basic things. You know, throughout history, we didn't know what the political situation will be in 20 or 30 years. But at least you knew what the job market would look like and what kind of skills people will need. Today, when you look 30 years to the future, nobody knows what the job market would look like, and nobody knows what skills people will need, so we don't really know what skills to teach young people today. The best bet is to teach young people how to learn, how to change throughout their lives. The one thing we know for sure about the job market of 2050 and the world of 2050, it will be very volatile, changing all the time, rapidly, in extreme ways. So people will need to keep learning and changing throughout their lives. So the most important thing is to teach kids not just how to learn, but really how to maintain mental flexibility, because you will need to keep changing throughout your life. This is something that for most people is very difficult. When you're young, then change all your life is just change. But most people, by the time they are 40 or 50, they don't like change very much. They like things to be more stable. And this is how it was for most of history. But it won't be like that in the 21st century. So I think the main aim of educational establishments should be to create people with flexible minds and with high emotional intelligence. We don't know about technical skills, what will actually be needed. Many people say everybody will need to know how to code computers. But maybe by 2050, AI can write code better than humans. So we don't need to actually write the code. This is obsolete. We need something else. So because of that, I would say the best bet is on mental flexibility. Over the 2 years since I wrote the book, I think that the situation of the world became much, much worse, because instead of moving towards global cooperation on things like AI and climate, we have been running in the opposite direction there is greater and greater global tension and rivalry. We are actually, what I feared 2 years ago was an AI arms race, especially between the US and China and maybe other countries. And 2 years ago it was mainly a fear. Now it's a reality. We are already in the midst of an AI arms race between China and the US, and that's terrible news for the whole world. It doesn't matter who wins the race, the loser will be humanity. Unless we can somehow stop the AI arms race and move back in the direction of global cooperation, then it will be almost impossible to prevent these dystopian scenarios. Because in a situation of an AI arms race, or an arms race of any kind, also in biotech, everybody says, well, yes, it's very dangerous and we don't want to do it, but the other side are doing it, the Americans, the Chinese, the Russians, whatever, so we have to do it first. We can't stay behind. And everybody is saying the same thing, and it's humanity is running towards disaster. So this is like my main lesson for the last two years. We are running in the wrong direction.